Actually, the picture I'm showing you here is the German news agency, Deutsche Presseagentur. It's their newsroom, and where I've put the red arrow is where the science editors sit. So at the very other end. So you see in the front is the desk of the guy, it's called the desk. It's these really powerful people who decide which news are, it's the true gatekeepers in the old sense of the word, who control which news are going out to Germany. And the science editors are at the very other end of the newsroom. But they're there. I mean, after all, they're in the room, and actually I observed with them for a day. I sat with them and looked how they worked. And they're actually quite influential in that newsroom for various reasons, because they're asked a lot for advice. They co-author many news agents bulletins in Germany, so they're quite important. But the question is, will they always be there? Will there always be a need for science reporters in the news agencies? Most other news agencies don't have science journalists, but they just have regional. They have a regional organization of their work. So in every region of Germany or in every region of the world, they have reporters, and when there's science, they cover it. But the question is, if in Japan a catastrophe happens, of course the reporter in Tokyo will report, but will he be assisted by a science journalist at home who has the contacts to the experts? And will this be put together in a way that makes sense, or will it not? For me, if it is a crisis in science journalism, it is a general crisis in journalism. Because if I talk here about science journalism, it's because what I do, but I do care for other specialized reportings. I think it's important to have experts who can tell me about, things happening in culture, in art, in music. And I think it's important to have, good sports reporting, of course. So I think, and people who can explain the financial crisis to me, because they have been, following this up and are close to the experts. This is what I think this is what makes the difference between journalists and people who just copy stuff on the internet, who just blog whatever that comes to their mind. I mean, we need people who understand and do in-depth analysis of the situation. Otherwise, we have no chance of doing professional work. Okay, so this has been my general appeal. So how do we deal with this as scientists now, trying to analyze how are newsrooms changing? I found it very useful to look into organizational theory. You in communication science, you're often taught sociology. Sociology is the theory, and it provides also, social science, the methods for analyzing communications. Some of it is too complicated for me, being a journalist, so I thought maybe it's worthwhile looking at the other social science, which is economy. And there are very clever people in business studies. And there's this whole world of organizational theory to be discovered in journalism studies, I think, or in communication science in general. There's this really clever author called Henry Mintzberg, who's a Canadian, who should be read by communication scientists, if you ask me. He did this really great analysis of how can you organize a company, and how does a company grow, and how can it change. So I borrowed from him. I looked at his way of looking. He developed these ideal types of organizations. So I don't want to go into the details. I think you'd rather read about it, but I'll just sketch it out so you understand why I think it's important. He says there are some organizations that are like some companies that work. He calls them machine bureaucracies, because they're very strictly organized, and they have very similar products. So it's like soap factories. And then there's so it's very standardized. So the product is standardized, the processes are very standardized. It's very strict control from above. And on the contrary, you have these professional bureaucracies where it's not the product that's the same, but you have these professionals with academic background doing very individual products. One example for this are universities. You will not be able to run a university like you can run a soap factory. You have these very powerful professionals called scientists, lecturers, professors, who have a lot of power in this, and who will not let anybody on top tell them what they have to do. And in a way, the old form of newspaper or broadcasting organization is also like this. A strong journalist community, of editor community, will not let the editor-in-chief tell them too much what to do. But this is changing. This is why actually I put here on the slide, there's Greenwood Hinnings who suggests the managed professional business as an ideal type, where actually you have employed academics, but you still have very strict governance and very business-oriented management. These are the MBA people who still control the academics. And then maybe the last form I would like to introduce here is the adhocracy, which is creative teams. It's something I enjoy being in. It's people where from different backgrounds working together, coming up with innovations, having a lot of liberty to do things, not being under constant pressure of producing, I don't know, lectures all the time or producing soap all the time, but they have to come up with new stuff, and they're given freedom to explore. It's creativity labs, these autocracies. Many startup companies work like this in the beginning. And this can be used, of course, to understand how journalism is organized. Of course, you have these creative teams of journalists who do crazy things on the internet or anywhere else, on the radio. Some friends come together and come up with a new format. And of course, professional bureaucracy, you will see this in any public broadcasting organization where most people are almost work like real bureaucrats with their pension funds fixed, and they all belong to certain unions and so on. Right. What is interesting, this organizational theory, which is very much practice-oriented, can be linked to what we know from communication science, to words like typification, framing of stories, angles of news. By a very clever, again, it's Henry Mintzberg who came up with this element of professional bureaucracy. He calls it the pigeonholing process. And this is why this drawing is here, where the idea is a professional in an organization, somebody with an academic background, he's able to handle certain cases. So take the example, and this is why you have all these files. So he can deal with these files, he can open up drawers, he can create new drawers, and he can responsibly deal with files. Example, take a hospital. A doctor who has gone through all his education, he knows how to deal with a bad liver, right? So it's a bad liver, he has the bad liver file. Whenever somebody with a bad liver comes, he knows how to deal with this. And he also updates this, this file according to the latest academic standards and so on. He takes courses and so on, but he works responsibly. And no boss will tell him in detail how he should do it. And no customer will be able really fully control what he does. While in the machine bureaucracy, if the soap isn't good, you can tell. If the treatment is good, it's more difficult. And this process of pigeonholing, as Mintzberg calls it, is very similar to the news selection process, actually, because we as journalists, and I think I have it on the next. No, I don't have it on the next slide. Sorry, I had a slide on this one, but sorry, I have to go back. What we do as journalists is we go out in the world and we have some kind of framing in the back of our head, or we have a pair of glasses, and we look at what's happening, and we know how we can turn this into news because we know the processes of our organization. So if I hear on the news there's a reactor exploded in Japan, I can easily know. I know exactly how I can turn this into a product in my radio station at home, because I know how my editors react, I know what the formats are that I can use, I know why this news is important. I have an interview tomorrow in Montreal, and I know exactly, or at least I have an idea how I might be able to sell this interview later. I don't know yet, but I'll try. And this process is, I know not only the news, but I can know how I can shape these news, how I can treat these news to turn them into a product. And this is exactly what a doctor would do with a liver. I know this is a reportage, or this is an animal story, or I can do these framings, with it. And this is also what the organizations, this is not something you do alone as a reporter, but that's something you do when working in the team of editors, reporters, sub-editors, and so on. And this is why I have a second picture for you. It's the idea of a corridor. So you have all these routines in the newsroom, all these rules and sometimes unwritten rules, sometimes flexible rules of how you can come at the very end to the publication. And you walk through this corridor. Sometimes you can change it. You can say, no, we're not going to do this anymore like we've done in the past 2 years. We'll change this rule. And so you break through a wall together with your colleagues. But you have some liberty of how you do it. Everybody writes different. Everybody has a different style of interviewing. But at the end, you have to come up with a product. So you have what I call a mental plan in your head of how you're going about it as an editor to do your 20-minute broadcast in the morning. When I work as an editor and I plan my 20-minute broadcast for the next morning, you can come any time in this work process and ask me, what's your plan? I think a good editor will always be able to tell you what his current plan is. He will say, okay, I have these 2 plans, I have sent out that reporter, and the 3rd one I don't know yet, I'm waiting for the news for tomorrow, and then I'll decide. Okay, and it says, I want a certain mix, I want something live, I want something pre-produced, I want something lively for the end so people will like it, and I need a strong opener. You know, there's always this plan that becomes more and more concrete while you run through this corridor. Yeah? Yeah. I mean, these, and it's not me as an individual, but it's the team. You know, there's constant communication in the newsroom between 2 or 3 or 4 people discussing how they will fill these boxes or how they will organize this process. Yes, I mean, the people are, of course, involved in this organizational exercise. All I'm trying to say, well, sometimes I only speak about me, but I do mean it's a team effort to do this. And it's not a one fixed way of soap production, but it's a partly creative, partly based on professional knowledge process that has to be dealt with in teams.